Now we begin with following strident criticisms of President Bola Tinubu's absence from the country in spite of increasing domestic challenges. The presidency yesterday rose in his stout defense, saying the president has continued to carry out his official functions from Europe. While appreciating the public concern over the president's absence from Nigeria, presidential spokesman Bayo Onanuga in a release disclosed that President Tinubu has been in constant touch with key government officials. According to Bayo Onanuga, the president has also been giving directives to security chiefs over emerging security threats and would resume duties at the State House, Abuja, after the Easter holiday. President Tinubu's latest visit to France has stirred a storm of criticism from opposition parties, civil society groups and prominent Nigerians who argued that the trip was ill-timed and showed a lack of sensitivity to the country's worsening security and economic conditions. Opposition parties like the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the Labour Party have questioned both the intent and timing of the visit, expressing suspicion over the lack of transparency in the president's itinerary. Well, Adefemi, today marks day 16 since the president travelled out on a working vacation to France. We've now been told he's in London.
Exactly that. And that's also what this day is reporting, and we'll get into that during the newspaper review. And, you know, we talked about this a lot throughout the day on yesterday's show, also during What's Trending. It's definitely something that is in public discourse, with people feeling that at a time like this, when we are having so much insecurity across widening parts of the country, that this should be a time where some Nigerians feel the president's face should be on ground right here. And so to be combating, staying on the topic of insecurity, these constant, it feels incessant, heinous murders of people, and hearing that the president is on a working leave of absence, it might not land as effectively as many people would expect, because it just feels as though there's a distance between the reality on ground for Nigerians and what is perceived to be a priority to the president. So we will keep our hopes open that he is doing exactly what the presidency says he's doing, which is, even though he's not in the country physically, he is still very much in charge, delegating duties to senior members of government and thereabouts. But I can imagine that, as we discussed yesterday, there are many people who would appreciate when a president shows his face at a time of crisis and emergency.
Okay, there are a number of critical issues here, which are also issues of law, issues of principles. Section 14 of the 1999 Constitution says that the primary purpose of government is to ensure the security and welfare of the Nigerian people. Now, the Constitution of Nigeria does not say whether you can do that by remote control or not. But what the Constitution expects is that the government of Nigeria will always be present to serve the Nigerian people. And the powers of the president are vested in him in Section 5 of the same 1999 Constitution. So as for those Nigerians who are saying that the president of Nigeria should be available at all times to attend to the needs of the Nigerian people, I think that they have a point. It's a constitutional responsibility. The presidency has consistently argued that the president of Nigeria can rule the country from anywhere in the world. Well, the Constitution prescribes a place of work. And, you know, by convention, by whatever, you know, you have a presidential villa. The president has an office. He has a place of function. That place of function does not reside in France, in Paris, or any part of the French Republic. The president of Nigeria shall be available to serve the Nigerian people. That's number one. So the people who are arguing that where is our president, they have a legitimate claim on the president. Voluntary non-fit injuria. If you don't like heat, don't go near the kitchen. If you have taken up a job, you do it. Number two is that when there is crisis in the country, the moral expectation also is that the people expect their president to be around so as to inspire confidence, to inspire trust, to lead from the front, not to lead from the diaspora, even if there's a lot of emphasis on diaspora engagements under the Nigerian government. The people who are complaining are saying that at this moment, the president of Nigeria is in diaspora. There have been killings in Benue, there have been killings in Plateau, there is a resurgence of insurgency in Borno State. And the people, I also think, have a legitimate right to say, where is our president? He should lead from the front. Number 3, the statement by Mr. Bayo Ononuga says, with due respect, that the president has been involved in activities in Nigeria, even from wherever in France, whether Orly or Toulouse or Paris or wherever in France. Now, the irony here, the paradox here, is that the same constitution of Nigeria says that if the president is away, I think it says 21 days, there was an attempt to amend the time of absence to about 14 days. He will transfer power to his vice president through permission of the National Assembly. That has not been done in this case because he has not yet exceeded the constitutional limit. But they say the president is on a working visit. Now, which responsibilities as Mr. President assigned to his vice president? They were inaugurating a panel to take charge of census. It was the chief of staff to the president that was given the responsibility to inaugurate that committee. Now, the chief of staff has no role under the Constitution. He's at best a special advisor. The Constitution provides for the appointment of 22 special advisors and also provides for the appointment of ministers representing each state of the Federation. So if we have a vice president who has been rendered to just visiting and attending ceremonial things, so again, those Nigerians who have been complaining have the legitimate right to say, yes, the president is not around. Why is the vice president not leading? Why has he not been given the powers to perform his functions within the Constitution? Even if within the time frame, the president can still be away. These are the fault lines, the loopholes that I see. But you see, governance basically is about the president showing up for his people. I recall, and this is a personal experience, and I have the authority to speak on this based on my experience and exposure. When the Chibok girls incident occurred in 2014, I think we were somewhere in the Caribbean. You know, President Jonathan immediately called a meeting because we were supposed to go from there to, I think, Japan. Now, so many people were not happy because we were looking forward to the trip to Japan. We never made it to Japan in the 4 years that we spent in government. So there was this meeting, and the consensus was that, no, we should leave that country and return to Nigeria immediately. And we came back home, you know, almost immediately. After that meeting, we rushed to the airport and returned to Nigeria. Now, that was a demonstration of the fact that, you know, the president should be there when there is crisis in the country because he's the man they voted for, he's the man they gave their mandate, and they would like to see him being on the ground. If they do not see him, they would like to see the vice president leading also from the front. But the vice president is somewhere else when something as important as a census committee was being inaugurated. The optics do not look good. And I think that the persons who have been complaining, whether for partisan reasons or, you know, for their own personal reasons or out of patriotism, they will seem to have a point. Their simple request is this, that President Tinubu, given the urgency of the issues in the Northeast, in the Middle Belt, in the northeastern part of the country, has a responsibility to be on the ground. They want to see him, not process, not press statements. I rest my case.
Absolutely, because the press statements are not going to the grassroots. The press statements are not consoling those who are bereaved, those communities who have lost over 100 people just in the month of April alone. It is unfortunately not these press releases that will make an impact that is needed for citizens to feel the assurance, the confidence, and the commitment of leadership from their very own leader. Of course, we maintain the president is a human being. He is entitled to take a leave. But I find working vacation to be a bit of an oxymoron in this instance. Why do I say that? It's a loophole. Because Section 145 of the Constitution, of course, does say that a president is entitled to take his leave of absence, but he needs to write to the National Assembly so that the necessary handover processes can be done, as Dr. Abati has already explained. Now, one of the issues that is being brought up is people are saying this process obviously didn't happen. There was no note written to the National Assembly to advise of the president's leave, and this is because it's a working leave. The Constitution makes provisions for a vacation, a complete leave. But the president is saying he is working, and that's the oxymoron and the loophole that I want to bring to the fore today. I'm so grateful that Dr. Abati brought the example of Goodluck Jonathan. We've also seen President of Tanzania, President Suluhu Hassan. She abruptly ended her trip in Dubai at the COP28 summit in 2023 because 50 people had died from flooding in her country. Also, we recall on the international scene, 1998, Bill Clinton ended his trip in Northern Ireland to return back to Washington because the embassies in Kenya and Tanzania had been bombed. So what's the ultimate message here? That when there is a crisis with your citizens, the only place you should be is at home, on the ground, with your people. Unless there's more to the story that we do not know that will not allow the president to come home, we do anticipate his speedy return to duty as soon as Easter is over. Well, the federal government, in other news, the federal government has set a target to generate and distribute at least 8,000 megawatts of electricity by the end of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's first term in office in 2027. The Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, gave the projection at the ministerial press briefing on the Power Ministry. Arise correspondent Ferdinand Durowa reports on the scorecard presented.
The 7th edition in the series of the ministerial press briefings provide an opportunity for the Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, to give an update on the state of power generation and distribution in the country. Adelabu hits the ground running by pointing out that the power sector has already recorded a 40% improvement in generation since the current administration assumed office. According to him, the average daily power generated and distributed in the last quarter of 2025 was 5,700 megawatts, indicating an addition of 1,600 megawatts from 4,100 megawatts in the last quarter of 2023. Attributing the achievement to sectoral reforms backed by the federal government, Adelabu says that if the current trajectory is maintained, the 8,000 megawatts target by 2027 is achievable.
Past administrations have their own positives. Creation of the NIPPs, preparation of the sector, a lot of things that they achieved. But if they have been adding at least 1,000 megawatts of power since 1999, we'll be talking about 26,000 megawatts plus 2,000 plus 4,000. That would be about 30,000 megawatts of power in Nigeria today. But we cannot keep dwelling in the past. It's the way forward. Now that we have created a trajectory, if we sustain this trajectory, I can assure you that before the end of this administration in 2027, the first end of this administration, 2027, we should be able to generate and distribute not less than 8,000 megawatts of power.
The minister also stated that within this period, on the 2nd of March 2025, Nigeria reached the landmark generation available capacity of 6,003 megawatts, marking the first time this level had been recorded in the country's history of the power sector. On access to power, the minister says approximately 150 million Nigerians now have access to adequate electricity.
The issue is not really about access, it's about the reliability of this access. And reliability is measured in terms of stability of the access and affordability of this access. which is what we were working on. So when we were presenting our compact, we told them that when you're extending energy access to these additional 300 million people, let's not focus on renewable energy alone. It should be appropriate for rural environments, rural communities. But we have to also focus on strengthening the grid infrastructure so that those that already have access, the access will be made reliable. Otherwise, how do we explain a lot of Nigerian companies who have opted out of the grid and started generating captive power for themselves? It's because of non-reliability of the existing access.
Addressing the sector's financial framework, Adelabu noted that the electricity tariff reforms implemented had yielded an increase of 700 billion naira in revenue. This revenue is expected to reduce the budgeted 2.8 trillion naira power subsidy by 1.14 trillion naira.
For 2023, power sector market revenue was 1.05 trillion, just about 1 trillion. And that's what we've been able to generate all these years with incremental growth of 10%, 5% on an annual basis. But with the tariff review that was implemented in 2024, the revenue grew from 1 trillion in 2023 to 1.7 trillion, which is 700 billion increase.
Now, despite improvements in generation, Nigeria's grid continues to underperform. Analysis show that the national grid suffered no fewer than 12 collapses in 2024, plunging the country into repeated blackouts, with manufacturers spending over 238.3 billion naira on alternative power. To checkmate this frequent collapse, the minister is advocating for the grid to be regionalized to avoid total national blackouts.
What Nigeria needs today is a regional or regionalization of the national grid, so that if there's a problem in one part of the country, it will not affect other parts. Having a single national grid that will be down 100%, it is not desirable. So we are taking steps to make sure that we regionalize this grid through introduction of the Eastern and Western super grid.
The challenges in the sector, the minister enumerated issues like 4 trillion naira unpaid generation company debts through shortfalls, rampant vandalism, poor investment by operators, power theft and unpaid bills, and resistance to tariff review. Reacting to the minister's presentation, stakeholders lamented the high power tariff while asking the minister to punish discos who failed to deliver service to customers based on band allocation and failed to relocate or downgrade customers. Other issues highlighted by critics are the huge sums of debt owed by TCN to contractors, the high number of unmetered customers, and the reliance on foreign meter providers over local suppliers. They also called on the government to appeal to discos to supply free power to essential services like streetlights and security installations. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise.
Well, it's good to see optimism, excuse me, from the Ministry of Power regarding the power situation. Of course, we know as much as he's reporting that 150 million Nigerians have access to power, the lived reality of that doesn't speak to those particular statistics, because most Nigerians will say we may have access to power, but we do not enjoy the actual presence of power in our homes. And those who are enjoying the presence of power are saying that with an imminent, they're saying there's another imminent tariff increase. With the tariff increase that we already saw that created the band system, band A, band B, band C, band D, power has become almost unaffordable, unattainable for most people. Now, with regards to injecting 1,900 megawatts into the grid from solar power, this is a very welcome development. We do know that in 2024, over 40% of the world's power was generated from renewable sources, that's solar. So this is a step in the right direction. It's coming a little bit late, but better late than never for us to see Nigeria begin to diversify into other power generation mechanisms beyond the traditional mechanisms.
I agree. I think many people would be more happy to hear that we're moving in that type of direction, because it is a resource that is largely untapped when it comes to the power of the sun and all of the sun that we have in this country, and how that can translate into addressing this power concern, especially since, as we'll see during the newspaper review, that there is also ramblings and chatter that the federal government is going to end its subsidy, and that's clearly going to have a knock-on effect. So I do think that when we're looking at so many different pockets of society in this country, it just feels as though you're running from pillar to post, from, what did they say, you're in between a rock and a hard place, where it just feels as though there's no respite everywhere you turn. So keep our, I mean, let's share in the optimism, as you say, but there are very, very many examples why people could be pessimistic at the future of this country, and electricity is just another example of that.
Well, I think, look, let's be very honest about this. If government ministers and principal officers have nothing to say, they should not hold press conferences. They should keep quiet. They should shut up and not come to the public and insult the intelligence of Nigerians. I think Adegoke Adelabu, the Minister of Power there, was just talking nothing, trash, absolute nonsense. The big problem that Nigeria has is that we've not been able to solve the problem in the power sector. And the fact that a minister of the Federal Republic will come forward and say that in 2027, Nigeria will generate 8,000 megawatts of electricity, I think it's very insulting to Nigerians. Brazil, which has about the same population as Nigeria, generates over 100,000 megawatts of electricity. It's the seventh largest producer of electricity in the world, with a model that includes diversification from hydro to other sources of energy. South Africa has issues with electricity. It has a population of 63 million people. But that same country at the time was generating, despite the problems in the electricity sector that led to the firing of a minister of power, under the decent president. Now, they generate over 100 megawatts, 100,000 megawatts. So Nigeria, with over 200 million people, is now saying, oh, first quarter of 2025, we have generated 5,700 megawatts. In 2027, we'll generate 8,000 megawatts. What kind of talk is that? The truth of the matter is that there are fundamental issues in that electricity sector that will have to be addressed. They are talking about what they call a national integrated electricity policy. I've not seen anything that is original in that policy. What we see is that, one, there is a problem with the grid, the national grid of Nigeria. The experts in that sector, including Professor Yemi Oke, have been saying, look, you have to do something about that national grid. You have to diversify it. They have been saying that you have to take a look at the debt being owed. The Gencos and the Discos are being owed over 4 trillion naira. And the Gencos and the Discos have been threatening that they will down tools. If they down tools, how will you generate even this your fictitious, imaginary, literature, imaginative, 8,000 megawatts? Who is going to pay that 4 trillion naira? Over 20 states in this country, including important government departments, are owing the Discos. And the Discos are saying we have issues. So look, what we need is a lot of creative thinking, a lot of originality at both the federal level and the state level. It's not enough to just hold a press briefing and make promises and say by this. All the promises that have been made in that sector have not been met. So what we have seen is a politicization of the energy sector, where people are told what they want to hear. I do not think that there is any significant substance in what Minister Adelabu has said. He and the other stakeholders will have to go back to the drawing table. We had all these statements under Minister Fashola as minister in charge of power. Okay, where did it take us? So after 2027, they will tell us in another 4 years, we will generate, maybe they will say 10,000 megawatts there. The megawatts that they generate, how many of that can be delivered, can be evacuated on the same grid that collapsed 11 times in 2024 and that has also acted with a mind of its own due to inefficiency and incompetence and contradictions in that sector in the year 2025. So please, Fela said, teacher, don't tell me nonsense.